This glitch is completely undocumented online, and its existence tormented Pokemon speedrunners for ages. It lets you skip almost any trainer battle in the game and took years for people to discover. I am talking about the Mount Skip glitch in Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. Now, I know I normally make videos on the Generation 4 Pokemon games, but I couldn't help but make a video on this topic. I was personally heavily involved in researching this topic, and I hold multiple speedrun world records that utilize this glitch. In this video, I'll explain the history of the Mount Skip glitch and how it works, finally documenting it all publicly. Let's get into it. The Pokemon franchise is no stranger to glitches. Generation 1 Pokemon games feature some of the most notorious glitches of all time, and can be completely busted open by experienced speedrunners. In Generation 2, you can warp to Red from a fresh file in under 10 minutes. In Emerald, you can hatch an egg that teleports you directly to the Hall of Fame screen. In Generation 4, you can tweak out of bounds into the Void and complete the game significantly faster than normal. The well-known glitchiness of Generation 4 seemed to make Game Freak incredibly more thorough with their approach to minimizing game-breaking glitches. In particular, they started to add tons of story flags throughout the games, meaning that even if you could glitch out of bounds and run somewhere you weren't supposed to, there would be checks in place to prevent you from doing anything meaningful. From Pokemon Black and White in 2010 through Sword and Shield in 2019, there were effectively no useful glitches for speedrunners to take advantage of. The most noteworthy one is probably that one rock you can literally just walk through in Black and White in the Ice Gym, but that's incredibly minor and hardly a glitch. You can check speedrun.com for yourself. None of these games have any differentiation between glitchless and glitched. 4 entire generations were free from the wrath of Pokemon speedrunners until July 25th, 2021. On this day, Cruel, a longtime Pokemon speedrunner, was doing a Catch-'em-all series speedrun. He was approaching the end of playing through Let's Go Eevee's Victory Road and did something nobody had ever even considered to be possible.
Am I saying that right? I hope I'm saying that correct.
Now, what you just saw might not mean anything to you, especially if you have never played these games before or you just don't remember unimportant details. The NPC that Cruel casually runs past is named Pokemaniac Dawson. Dawson is actually a required trainer, meaning you cannot leave Victory Road without fighting him. Somehow in this clip, Cruel just didn't activate the trainer battle. Cruel was completely unaware that he had even skipped the trainer until someone in chat pointed it out and clipped it. The glitch, immediately deemed Dawson's skip, shocked the community. There was mass confusion when the clip spread, leading to questions like, how did you do that? How did we not know about this? Does this happen because of Rapidash or the terrain around the trainer? And this skip easily saves over a minute. Now, a minute may not seem like much for a 3-hour-long speedrun, but it's massive when you realize that the difference between 1st and 4th place in Let's Go Eevee for a very long time was just 17 seconds. Sure enough, people were eventually able to replicate it, albeit incredibly inconsistently. In my own practice, I maybe got it 5% of the time. When going for the skip, we essentially just line up with the rock before the trainer, hold right, and pray to Arceus that we'll get the free time save. By now, you're probably wondering why nobody found out about this for almost 3 whole years. In most Pokemon games, it's faster to talk to trainers you need to battle rather than letting them see you. By talking to trainers, you save time from skipping the exclamation point popping up over their head and potentially walking to you. In Let's Go, trainers walk to you incredibly slowly. Every speedrunner ever just talks to trainers to save time, except for runners who are rusty, like Cruel, or new players. As the community learned of the glitch, many tests were done to see if this could be replicated with other ride Pokemon or on other trainers. For context, Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee are effectively Pokemon Yellow remakes mixed with Pokemon Go mechanics. In Let's Go, there are a variety of Pokemon you can ride in place of the bike mechanic from other games. After many tests, no success was had with other mounts, or even on other trainers. The glitch being so inconsistent meant that it sort of remained in a weird spot. Some speedrunners would go for it and some wouldn't, because failing meant losing a couple seconds to the trainer walking to you. Plus, there was only one time on the leaderboards that successfully got the skip. Additionally, skipping this trainer would cost you crucial experience. The standard speedrun route lets your main battle Pokemon Starmie hit level 53 just in time for Lance's Dragonite. Skipping the trainer would prevent you from hitting this key level up, ultimately making Lance significantly riskier if your Starmie had a bad special attack stat. I personally didn't even bother with it for the majority of my own world record attempts. The glitch remained in this weird purgatory until March 3rd, 2022, when a user by the name of Game2590 posted in the Switch Pokemon speedrunning server. They said they may have found a way to skip Juggler Nelson, the second required trainer in Victory Road. Game was learning the speedrun at the time, and as a result didn't always talk to trainers the way experienced runners do. Sure enough, when checking the YouTube video they provided, they simply ran past the trainer with Rapidash. No battle, no exclamation point, nothing. This blew the doors wide open on things to test, as we finally confirmed that this wasn't a Dawson-specific thing and could potentially be done anywhere. After tons of testing by various community members, there was a stunning conclusion. If you are riding Rapidash, you can skip any trainer in the game. Due to the nature of the speedrun, there's only 4 trainers you could actually skip in this manner after acquiring Rapidash, all in Victory Road. If we could consistently skip all of them, we would save about 4 minutes and also cut out one of the most dangerous fights in the run, H Trainer Naomi. Many top-level speedruns boil down to hitting an 80% accurate Hydro Pump that may or may not one-shot her Kangaskhan. Being able to cut that risk out of the run would be massive. Even with this knowledge, we still could not reliably reproduce this glitch. Movement is super finicky in Let's Go since the games force you to play with Joy-Cons and their terrible joysticks. Plus, it was clear that the window to skip a trainer is so incredibly tight that it's completely luck-based whether or not you hit it. So why does this happen? We didn't have any real answers because no one in the Switch speedrunning community at the time had any experience investigating these sorts of things. The Let's Go games in general had tons of unknowns and mysteries at the time. For one reason or another, very few people had dug into the games enough to figure things out. It wasn't until July 2022 that we learned how a Pokemon's catch rate was actually calculated in Let's Go, despite the game being almost 4 years old. Yes, for over 3 years, no one knew how catching actually worked. We had no idea how much of a bonus 2 controller catching added, what effects a Raspberry had, what the color circles meant, anything. And this catch data was actually the inadvertent first step of how we solved this mount skipping mystery. On July 10th, 2022, Anubis, a well-known Switch Pokemon data miner, posted a thread out of nowhere fully detailing the Let's Go catch formula. It covered literally everything speedrunners wanted to know. What all the different berries did, the impact of 2 controller versus 1 controller catching, how effective each ball was, and what the colored circles actually meant. With this data, the speedrunning community immediately made catch calculators, figured out lots of route and strategy adjustments, and ultimately reinvigorated the community to start running the game again, especially for the categories that involved catching tons of Pokemon. Naturally, I retweeted Anubis' thread with intense excitement, which led to Anubis randomly popping into one of my streams. So of course, I took the opportunity to ask if she had any ideas why Rapidash would be able to skip a trainer battle. Anubis didn't have an answer, and it wasn't really within her area of expertise, so I figured that was going to be the end of it for a while. That is, until I randomly executed a mount skip on Ace Trainer Naomi in a speedrun and got the world's first ever sub 3-hour time. I was so stoked and could not believe I got this incredibly unlikely event on such a good run. I thought I would just move on from the game and do something else since I reached my ultimate goal time. But shortly after, another community speedrunner encouraged me to do some intense, super scientific testing to see if we could easily recreate these skips. At this point in the video, I haven't clearly stated it, but I absolutely love these games. Across these 7 generations of Pokemon speedruns that I've done, they are far and away my favorite to run. These games are oozing with passion and attention to detail from the developers, and they are actually the games that got me back into Pokemon after Generation 4. So I said, what the heck, let's try to figure this out. I had a very clear idea of what I needed to confirm first for my testing. Can I find a spot where, if I simply mount Rapidash and hold left, consistently pass Ace Trainer Naomi? If this was possible, then it could lead to speedrun viable mount skips. There's one problem with this test, and that is the holding left part. To reiterate, Switch Joy-Cons are terrible. Any attempts to hold left with a stock controller and hope you go in a perfectly straight line are completely futile. I went on Amazon and found a third-party Joy-Con that was gated, meaning you could consistently go in straight lines unlike normal Joy-Cons. We also utilize a trick where we open the menu, hold the direction we want to go in, then close the menu to guarantee we go straight. With these Joy-Cons in hand, I began testing, and testing, and testing. Eventually, this happened. Okay, I need to see if this is consistent or not. After succeeding at consistently skipping Naomi, I did additional testing and confirmed that my Y-axis positioning didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was my X-axis positioning. Now, logically, you'd be thinking, awesome, problem solved. Now we can skip one trainer every run by getting in the right position. We just need to repeat this process for the other trainers and then we're good to go. Unfortunately, there are caveats to this, the biggest being that aligning yourself correctly off of visual cues alone is basically impossible. It turns out that the window for this positioning is small, incredibly small. If you compare 2 screenshots side by side with virtually identical positioning, one could get the skip and the other could fail it depending on which subpixel each player was on. At this point, I was pretty stuck. We had no way to consistently get into this position or identify what position we were even in. I posted a tweet about the setup position finding, and ultimately Anubis figured out a way to help. She ended up making a modification to one of her existing bot programs for Let's Go that allowed us to read player coordinates in real time. Without this capability, we would never have been able to figure any of this out, so thank you again to Anubis. With the coordinate printing tool in hand, all it took was a lot of patience to figure out why exactly mount skipping worked. When Anubis first got the program working, I was actually on vacation at a convention, Gen Con for my fellow nerds. I had some downtime and hopped on a Discord VC, literally in the convention hallways, with Anubis and asked her to test things in real time as I viewed her game feed and coordinates. While simply running into a wall, Anubis noticed very quickly that there were times where the character's position jumped approximately 26 whole units, whereas other mounts that were in the same speed tier would only jump approximately 24 units. After Anubis tested all the mounts, we learned that only Rapidash and Aerodactyl had this max speed of 26 units. Nobody had tried to do the mount skips with Aerodactyl before, since it's not really convenient to get in the 80% speedrun. But sure enough, Anubis was able to skip a trainer with Aerodactyl. It was clear that this 26 unit number was the key to why skipping trainers happened. Let's take a look at how trainer vision works in Let's Go. Being a remake of Pokémon Yellow, the maps are based on the same 2D grid design of the original game. The main difference is that we have full freedom of movement and can cross these lines diagonally at pretty much any angle we want to. Trainer vision isn't based on the 2D grid as a result, so instead you can envision it as an ultra-thin laser coming out of their forehead. If you pass this laser, the trainer spots you and initiates battle. We take advantage of this in several spots of the game where some trainers' visions don't fully extend, so you can simply walk past some trainers if you maneuver correctly. Now, with the magic of being able to read and set our character's coordinates, I was able to manually test and confirm how wide this trainer vision was. I teleported a minuscule distance repeatedly around Naomi and found the vision range to be 25.28 units. Everything made sense now. Rapidash and Aerodactyl are the only Pokemon that can perform these skips because they are the only Pokemon that can jump over that 25.28 unit range. Essentially what's happening is that both of these mounts with their max speed of 26 units can skip right past a trainer's vision if your initial positioning falls within that 0.72 unit window. This also means that this should work at every interval of 26 units. So if you find the coordinates for one working position, you can do some math and figure out all the other coordinates that would work. For example, let's say starting at an X position of 1627 and holding left skips the battle with Ace Trainer Naomi. That would mean all of these positions work as well, assuming terrain isn't blocking you and you're not too close to the trainer. Okay, so now we understand how the glitch works. How do we utilize this knowledge to save time during our speedruns? Should be pretty simple, just get into one of the working positions and hold left, right? Well, like I said earlier, getting into these positions purely off of visual cues is extremely unreliable. Community member Sandy Beach also did tons of testing in this process. They actually developed a method to perform a skip by using audio cues. More specifically, using the noise your character's feet make when you take steps. Here's an example courtesy of Sandy. Unfortunately, this is too unreliable and slow to use in the speedrun. With how precise these skips are, I needed to develop a method that would reliably get me in the correct position. I began working on finding speedrun viable mount skip setups. Ideally, what I wanted was to just do a set of inputs, end up in a working position, then move right past the trainer. Given that we can move in straight lines with the third-party Joy-Cons, how can we guarantee that we get into the right position? I came up with a few simple tricks to make it happen. The first one's going to be fairly obvious. We're going to use the natural terrain of the cave. By just gliding off of the terrain, we can get consistent positioning. For example, if I am on Rapidash and run straight into this wall then stop, I will always end up in the same X-axis position. But there's more that we can do with this. Let's take a look at this wall near the third trainer skip. We're going to aim into the indented part of this wall, then turn straight right. By doing so, we should bounce off of this part of the wall that is sticking out. It turns out that, for this specific trainer, this is all that's needed to set up a mount skip. From here, we run straight down with Aerodactyl and skip the trainer. But what if bouncing off terrain isn't enough? That's where we introduce trick number 2, what I call wiggling. By sharply turning 180 degrees, we can consistently move a set amount of units in any direction. For example, if our character is facing up, we can menu, hold down, and we should move a few units either left or right. The best part about wiggling is that it sometimes doesn't work. If you're doing up and down wiggles, sometimes the controller or game decides to wiggle in the opposite direction of what you want. I've tried a few tricks to mitigate this, but it might just be a flaw of the Joy-Cons. With these two tricks combined, getting into position is just a matter of executing controller inputs in the right order. As long as you do that, and you don't wiggle the wrong way, you will always succeed with the skips. When it was time to apply this knowledge to find setups, I found much more success with Aerodactyl compared to Rapidash. As a result, version 1 of the speedrun viable mount skips all use Aerodactyl. The downside is that Aerodactyl comes at a heavy cost of the most valuable currency in speedrunning: time. In order to get Aerodactyl, you have to return to Pewter City and get the old amber from the lab. Then you must revive it at the Cinnabar lab. This detour takes about a minute, but it isn't as awful as it sounds. A big part of Let's Go Speedrunning is catching Pokémon. In these games, you need to have 50 Pokémon registered in your Pokédex in order to enter Koga's gym. Aerodactyl is in fact a Pokémon, so it counts towards the requirement and lessens the sting of the long detour. At the time, I was totally fine with this time loss since I was going to be saving multiple minutes from the mount skips anyways. I got a few world records with these skips, but eventually I wanted to do better. Just this year, I spent way too much time researching and perfecting Rapidash-based mount skips. The issue with Rapidash before was that, with the previous method I described, I couldn't find fast and consistent setups for all the trainers. So I came up with a new approach that is really hard to explain. Basically, the old approach emphasized doing a set of inputs in the correct order with fairly loose initial positioning, whereas my new approach emphasized using visual cues to get into a much stricter initial position in order to get a very specific bounce off of a very specific part of a wall to hit a specific sub-unit. Yeah, I know it sounds crazy, let's just go through the skips and I'll explain along the way. This guy is Juggler Nelson, and we're going to skip him with our new approach to mount skipping. Take a look at this wall here. Notice how it's jagged and not just a straight line. If we run into this part of the wall, then turn, we can bounce off of this part of the wall. This would place us at these coordinates. If we ran into this part of the wall, we would bounce off of this part, placing us at these coordinates, very slightly different from the other wall bounce. Anyways, by lining up our feet with this pebble and then bouncing right, we land in a perfect skip position. Normally, you have to fight either Ace Trainer Caroline or Ace Trainer Colby to progress. Doesn't matter which one. The old skips ran past Caroline, whereas my new one skips past Colby. Here, I use the edge of my character's hat to line up roughly with the end of the wall. Once I'm lined up, I just run left, remount, and then run down. For Dawson, we use our character's feet to get into proper positioning. If you're playing as Chase, your stance is a little bit wider, so I look for his shoe to be barely touching the part of the gate, or just not barely touching it. If you're playing as Elaine, you need to have a small gap between her foot and the gate. From here, it's just straight down input and then go. You might have noticed that I skipped explaining the first trainer, Naomi. I couldn't find a good skip with this technique, so instead I used the old approach. We align with this wall, and then wiggle left 4 times, and we'll end up in perfect skip positioning. Something that I haven't talked about yet is that working starting positions change based on whether Rapidash is visible or not. Simply put, there is a speed difference initially between running with Rapidash out versus not out. This is why a lot of times we unmount and then mount Rapidash. So for Naomi, it's important to remain mounted on Rapidash, whereas the other skips rely on not riding Rapidash when you begin the skip. And that's the current state of mount skips. With these, I have recently begun grinding the 90% categories for Eevee and Pikachu, and I'm hoping to beat the game in 2 hours and 55 minutes or less. Ultimately, while the skips I showed require these specific Joy-Cons, it is possible to formulate your own skips with other Joy-Cons. There are third-party joysticks and Joy-Cons that do lock in your directional movement to some degree, but they might not work the exact same way these Joy-Cons do. The main reason I made this video, despite it not being about Gen 4, is that I actually got this speedrun accepted into Awesome Games Done Quick 2025. I'll be doing the speedrun on January 8th, and I'll put the schedule in the comments. I've done marathon runs of this category before and found it really difficult to explain the skips mid-run. Plus there's tons of technical details that haven't been documented publicly yet, so I figured this video could solve both problems. I'll also be sure to document exact numbers and other details on my website, sinjaruins.com. I want to thank the Let's Go Speedrunning community, in particular Sandy Beach, for finding working coordinates and documenting a bunch of stuff, and of course Anubis for making all of this possible. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe! I would really appreciate the support, and I promise my next video will be on a weird Gen 4 topic. Also, I would love to hear if anyone who has casually played this game experienced a mount skip and didn't realize it was a big deal at the time. It's definitely a rare occurrence to happen naturally, but I'm sure there are a few people out there who have experienced it. Thank you to all of my Patreon supporters, and special shoutouts to Florio, Mithra Was Taken, and Verota for your support. That's going to be it for this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.